else to get united. Like, what we gotta do is meet everybody on 149th Street at the bench.
So generating multiple styles for the same name can be quite tricky for a lot of graffiti artists. It's not an easy task, especially the longer you write a name. But in today's video, I'm going to teach you guys exactly how you can pull this off, what you need to look out for, and also why most graffiti artists are not capable of doing this. And we'll talk about that part at the end of the video. So first things first, we have to define what exactly style is, and this is something we've spoken about at length in plenty of videos, but style is just the exaggeration of the fundamentals. That's all it is. And that's true for every single art form. It doesn't matter what it is. Even something like cooking abides by that same rule. So when we take this and we apply it to graffiti specifically and graffiti artists, what we end up finding is graffiti artists learn through trial and error, without a lot of real formal studying going on. And what this results in is it results in the graffiti artists learning very specific ways in order to solve specific issues. When we look at art in general, what we end up finding out is art is a problem-solving activity. That's all it is. You have a negative space management issue, maybe there's an extension you'd like to put on a specific area of your piece. You have a letter name weight issue, maybe there's a certain way you like to lean a certain letter in order to help balance the weight. Maybe you have a 5-letter name. Well, maybe your third letter is really large because it helps to anchor the rest of your name down. And you continuously do this stuff in your work. It keeps popping up in your work and you resort back to it plenty of different times. Now, because a lot of graffiti artists learn through trial and error, this tends to be the slowest method of learning when done alone. There's a little topic in art known as artist habits. And essentially what an artist habit is it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the habits you have in your art. So not only is this kind of responsible for creating your visual style as an artist, but it's also responsible for continual mistakes. Now, there's two different kinds of major artist habits here. You have the positive artist habits and the negative artist habits. Typically, a lot of artists, especially when they're learning, they focus on their negative artist habits. So let me explain this one first. Let's say you sit down to draw one day and you go ahead and you're drawing a person. You're doing a portrait. We'll just use that as an example because we all know what a human face looks like. You go ahead to do the forehead and you make it a little bit too small. So you go ahead and erase that and you make the forehead bigger. It's something that you continuously mess up, and the way you want to fix this is by learning more about that thing. Same thing with graffiti. If you continuously mess up a letter in your name, you would learn more about how that letter functions, and as a result, you'd do a better job when you go ahead to draw it. That knowledge is going to get rid of your negative artist habits. Now, a positive artist habit is essentially something that you like the aesthetic of, so you do it because, well, you like the way it looks. For example, I use a lot of blue in a lot of my work, and the blue is always very similar. In oil painting, I actually have a specific mixture of blue I like using, and in other works, whether it's color pencils or digital, I try to emulate that same blue. So this isn't necessarily a fundamental flaw, but it's something that I aesthetically like, so I aim to put it in pretty much a lot of my work. Now, for more experienced artists of any kind, doesn't matter the art form, changing your positive artist habits will have the largest impact on your style. We've all seen graffiti artists, and we've even been guilty of it, of repeating letter structures over and over and over and over again. This is one of the biggest contributors to kind of repetitive style where you just do the same thing over and over and over again, right? So obviously one of the biggest things you want to do here in order to go ahead and fix something like this is to learn more about letter structure. Notice I'm not saying just use a different letter structure, but rather instead we're saying to learn more about letter structure. And the reason I'm very careful to word it that way is because a lot of newer graffiti artists, they hop onto Pinterest, they hop onto Google, they hop onto Instagram, Twitter, whatever the case is, and they look up alphabets, and then they go ahead and snatch that alphabet and slap it onto their piece. Or what we'll commonly see people do is they'll go ahead and just straight up bite somebody's letter and smack it onto their piece and act like, yeah, I came up with that, that's my style. And it's like, no, dude, that's not your style. What? You stole that letter. You stole all those extent, none of it is yours. That's not by any means your style. What is that? That's not what we want, right? We want actual control over our style. We want to be able to like mold this thing however we see fit, not copy here, copy there, put it onto my piece. Copy here, copy there, put it onto my piece. That's not style at all. That certainly isn't your style if it is to be style at all. And a big downfall of this is, once again, you don't have any control over it. So when it comes time for you to feel like you need to evolve, when it comes time where you're bored of doing the same thing over and over again, you're not able to do something different. Why? Because you don't know enough in order to do anything else. If you want to generate new styles for the same name, you're going to want to go ahead and do a straight letter of your name. Nice and simple. Nothing crazy. No extensions, nothing fancy. But look at your letters. Just the letter structures themselves. And think to yourself, are these letter structures I always use? If the answer is yes, change those letter structures. When you're changing these, don't copy other people's structures. Stay away from that. Maybe instead of using a 1-box bowl for an R, use a 2-box bowl. Maybe instead of a 2-box leg, use a 1-box leg. These are going to create new problems, new obstacles that you have to face, because these angles and the letter structures are not gonna fit together the same way that you're used to. So what'll end up happening is, let's just say for example my own name, maybe a one box leg of my R pushes my I too far away. Alright, well how do I want to solve that? Well maybe now I'm forced to use a lowercase I. Maybe that's the fix I want to go ahead and try out. Okay, so I use a lowercase I. Perfectly fine, no issue with that. So you could see how this process will suddenly cascade into you fixing multiple things. At the end of this, you should have a brand new straight letter with completely new letter structures. And the great thing about this is we only changed letter structure. Maybe instead you want to go ahead and observe your positioning and the orientation of the letters themselves. So maybe, for example, like me, you like to go ahead and lean one of your letters a little bit to the left. Well, maybe try leaning it to the right this time. Not too exaggerated, not too crazy, don't kick it over on its side. This is going to change your negative space management, which as a result will change the orientation and the planning for the rest of the name to follow. So now I have this added negative space in areas I didn't before. Now we're going to go ahead and fill those. First, try solving these fundamental issues with the fundamentals themselves. So fill in negative space with letter name positioning. Balance out the letter name weight by changing the letter structure's size, and try to fix those issues that way. Once you're done with that, any leftover issues, try to fix them with exterior details and extensions and things of that sort. More fun bits, you can stylize from there, and you'll find that you've made a second style. These little tiny tweaks have massive ripples in style, and you could do this for every single one of the fundamentals, and that's really the great part. But understand, to do it to that extent, you do have to know the fundamentals. And this is precisely why a lot of graffiti artists don't really have a second style, and maybe this was worth a second video entirely of its own. Let me know if you guys are interested in that. But you see, most graffiti artists aren't capable of more than one style. They really have just one style that took them decades to get, and then every other style that they have is copied and bitten and not original at all whatsoever. It's more of a Frankenstein amalgamation that they believe is their style when it actually isn't their style. How do we prove this? Ask them to explain the fundamentals behind their style. They can't do it. And let me explain that a little bit more. The first style a graffiti artist has usually takes them decades to get, and it takes them that long because they're learning solely through trial and error without any formal studying. It's the equivalent of trying to hit a bullseye all the way down on the opposite side of a long hallway in a pitch black room. Is it possible? Yes, but it's gonna take you a long time to get there. The problem is, by the time they've achieved that first style, they're an adult. They don't have time to dedicate to drawing graffiti every single day. They don't have time to dedicate to studying the fundamentals as much. They have responsibilities. They have a job. They have kids. They have bills. They have relationships. They have things to do. They can't spend the sleepless nights in their books anymore the way that they used to. And back when they were spending every single day drawing, even then with all that time investment, it took them a decade at least, if they're lucky, in order to originate a style. With less time, it would easily take them 2, 3, 4, 5 decades to get a second style. Knowing this, understanding that they're not going to be able to do a second style in a timely fashion that's original, they're forced to copy. So when you see a graffiti artist popping out 3, 4, 5, 6 styles and they can't explain the fundamentals behind it, you know they bit it. In every single other art form, it's standard in order to understand the fundamentals behind the art form you're doing. And if you understand the fundamentals behind the art form you're doing, you can generate styles in an instant. It might take you a couple of minutes to make a new style, or it might take you a couple of weeks, or a couple of months, depending on the complexity you want to go into. But it won't even take you a year. It might take you a year in order to establish it further, in order to evolve it and continue growing it, but to make it in the first place, it takes no time at all, if you know what you're doing. And keep in mind, whatever style you create has to be fundamentally correct. Otherwise, it's not style, it's mistakes. There's a key difference there. Style does not sacrifice the fundamentals to be created. And this is the issue a lot of amateur artists run into as well. And this is exactly why a lot of older graffiti artists, you see them do the same pieces over and over again. And while this isn't necessarily a problem, there's nothing wrong with doing the same pieces over and over again. If your ambition is to get a second style, then that may not be the path you want to go down. And if that's not the path you want to go down, you have one of 3 options. You can take multiple decades of trial and error without formal studying in order to create a second original style. You can copy other people's already established styles and then lie to yourself and say that it's yours, or you can learn the fundamentals and originate a new style whenever you want. But those are your 3 options. Those are your only 3 options. Now, if you want to learn the fundamentals of graffiti and kind of fuel your second style, or your very first style, if you're new to graffiti, then check out the best How to Do Graffiti playlist right up here, with even more graffiti content right down here. And I'll catch you guys back here next week. Thanks for watching.